Ian Burns walked into the house and was immediately struck by the aroma of fried chicken coming from the kitchen. He hung his jacket on the antique coat rack in the hallway just before his wife peeked around the doorframe. "Hi, darling." Lisa greeted him in her usual bright, cheerful manner, the same manner that had only irritated Ian lately. "Get yourself a beer. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. I prepared one of your favorite dishes." "Great," Ian replied, walking past Lisa to grab a beer from the refrigerator. If he noticed the offended expression on Lisa's face, he didn't bother to admit it. Lisa couldn't help but be hurt by Ian's apparent refusal to kiss her in greeting. This was yet another example of how Ian had rejected her over the last few years. 3 months. Earlier that day, Lisa had lunch with her mother to seek advice from her about what might be wrong, which, given her mother's wild imagination, was probably a mistake. "He's trying to distance himself from you, honey? Did you do something to upset Ian? You're not having an affair, are you?" Lisa was shocked by this question. "Of course not, Mom. Why are you even asking a question?" "Well, you must have done something, Lisa. Ian loves you." It was typical of her mother to take Ian's side, but the question of whether Lisa was having an affair sparked alternative thoughts. Did Ian have an affair? The thought of this scared Lisa to the core. Mother and daughter finished lunch, and instead of returning to the office, Lisa called her boss, took a half-day break, went shopping, and bought ingredients for one of Ian's favorite dishes. She was ready to fight for her man. As much as he hated it, Ian had to compliment Lisa on the delicious food. "It was good." "On what occasion?" "Nothing special. I just thought my man could use a nice home-cooked dinner." "I know we've both been busy with work and such, though I'd like to express my gratitude for how hard you've been working lately. All the extra time in the office." Lisa's mention of his extra time at the office caused instant anxiety in Ian, but he suppressed it, swallowing down the guilt. Lisa ignored the way Ian blinked and continued. "I have a surprise. I made a reservation for next weekend at that B&B in Ocean City where we stayed last year. I thought we could spend a couple of days hiking along the coast again. It was so good last fall." Last fall, Ian thought, when I was in love with his wife. Before the novel changed everything, Ian couldn't come up with a good excuse fast enough to avoid a weekend with his wife, so he just grabbed the first one that came to mind. "I may have to work next weekend." Lisa was ready. "No, you don't understand. I called Joseph this afternoon and made him promise me that you will have next weekend off." I didn't want to lose the deposit for the room. Lisa knew Ian's boss, Joseph. During the 3 years that Ian worked for Joseph at Genius Systems, Ian and Lisa attended many events with Joseph and his wife. Joseph became almost like a beloved uncle to Lisa. Another reason why if Ian divorced Lisa, his work life would be a living hell. Unless he can make Lisa look like the bad guy. It wouldn't be easy to make Lisa the reason for their divorce. Everyone loved Lisa. She was beautiful inside and out, and almost everyone knew that she was devoted to Ian. So why did he try to leave his beautiful, kind, loving wife? Because of another woman, of course. Ian met Carmen Benyon in line at a cafe across the street from his work. The brunette with the killer body was in front of him as they walked through the buffet. She filled her tray with the most expensive dishes, Ian paying more attention to her ass in those tight black pants than to what ended up on his own tray. Approaching the cash register, she rummaged in her purse, feigning bewilderment. "I know my wallet was here somewhere." The hungry patrons behind Ian began to grumble. The brunette turned to Ian, smiling. "Could you lend me $15, please? I will return the money next time." Ian was so captivated by this woman's smile and her face, she was gorgeous, that he didn't think about when the next time would be. He had never seen her before. He would remember that face and those beautiful breasts, and he blurted out, "Of course," and to the lady at the cash register, "Put it on my account." The brunette's smile grew wider. "Thank you." Ian expected it to end there, and was glad when she sat down at his table. "I'm Carmen." Ian reached across the table. "Ian." He shook her hand. Being a handsome man with the air of a successful man, Ian wasn't too surprised when the young beauty joined him. He's always had luck with the ladies, ever since high school. In college, Ian was the guy his fraternity brothers stuck close to, waiting for the scraps to get their hands on. There were always some nice-looking leftovers there. As they ate, Ian looked at Carmen's left hand for the ring. Many years ago, before he met Lisa, Ian had an affair with a married woman. It didn't end well for Ian. The horned husband caught up with Ian outside his apartment one night. Unfortunately, Ian wasn't much of a fighter. To even greater regret, it was her husband. Ian finished with injuries. When Ian's father found out the cause of the injuries, the old man threatened to disown Ian if he pressed charges against his husband. He also told Ian that it was time for him to grow up and settle down. Like many playboys, when Ian went looking for a wife, he avoided any promiscuous women he had dated and slept with up to that point. He ended up meeting Lisa Collins at a charity event. Lisa ticked all the boxes. Beautiful, smart, faithful, with a magnificent body and almost a virgin. A year after their first date, Ian and Lisa became husband and wife. Now, 3 years later, Ian's true nature has emerged again. Within 2 weeks of meeting Carmen in the cafe, he began to spend all the free time he could in Carmen's apartment. Over the course of 4 weeks, Carmen had Ian wrapped around her finger and asked him when he was going to divorce his wife. Instead of talking to his father, Ian called Simon Foster, an old fraternity brother, for advice. The two of them sat in the bar chosen for this occasion. Here's the thing. I'm not even 30, and my life is starting to resemble my parents' lives. Ian started the conversation. I met this woman, Carmen, and she makes me reconsider my choice. Carmen talks about visiting nudist beaches and having sex in warm Caribbean waters. Lisa talks about buying a house and having children. Ian noticed his friend's expression change, from the lustful smirk when mentioning sex and nude beaches to the frown when Ian used the words, having children. His fraternity brother understood the dilemma. He continued in this vein, and if the scales had not tipped in Carmen's favor earlier, the next 2 sentences would have sealed Lisa's fate. Carmen is fooling me. There is no sex that she would not consider. While Lisa makes love and is a little shy after 3 years of marriage, Carmen's body is decorated with tattoos and piercings. Lisa cannot understand how people can mark their bodies like that. Ian didn't mention that Lisa gave in 2 years ago and got a small butterfly tattoo in a place that only Ian and her doctor could see. Lisa insisted that the tattoo artist be a woman, and the tattoo itself really pleased Ian and calmed him down, for a while. Simon had the morality of an alley cat and the maturity of a newbie joining a fraternity. So ditch Lisa and have fun with Carmen until you get tired of her. You know you'll leave her eventually. She's just like everyone else, easily accessible to the girls you slept with at school. And don't tell me that you love this, Carmen. I know you better. Ian pondered Simon's wise words, or what sounded like wisdom after 3 ales and 2 patrons. The 2 brothers turned the conversation to sports. They kept getting louder, until an hour later the bartender interrupted them. Ian thanked Simon for meeting him, made plans to spend a weekend with him sometime in the future, and trudged home. When he woke up the next morning, Ian's head was pounding from the hangover and the taste of vomit in his mouth. What he could remember from yesterday's conversation made him realize that he needed to break up with Lisa. Listening to Simon's stories of loneliness, he became convinced that he had married too early and to the wrong woman. The problem now was the same as before, and Simon could not help solve the problem. How to make it so that Lisa was to blame for the marriage breaking up. Ian called into work sick. Lisa had already left, but she left a sweet note on the counter next to the coffee pot. In typical Lisa fashion, she hoped he had a good time with his college buddy last night. Why does she have to be so damn cute? He thought. Why does she have to be so damn cute? Ian thought again, looking out the side window during their trip to the coast the following weekend. All his actions over the past few months, being grumpy and sometimes downright nasty, ignoring her, avoiding sex, and when they had sex, just being selfish. None of it helped. He couldn't make Lisa lose her cool and attack him, either verbally or physically. Lisa spent the 4-hour trip in a good mood. They arrived at a romantic bed and breakfast, and Lisa seduced Ian into making love on the first night. Ian had to admit it was fantastic. Lisa kept her body in shape. The time spent in the gym only emphasized her natural beauty. But still, she was not Carmen. They woke up in the morning, naked, with Lisa's arm wrapped around his torso. They had a good breakfast, packed a picnic lunch into Lisa's backpack. Ian's backpack had water, a bottle of Pinot Noir, their first aid kit, and a blanket before heading out for the hike. It had been raining heavily and cold the night before, but by the time they stopped for lunch, the clouds had cleared. A perfect day for a hike and reunion. We went out into the sun. Ian and Lisa climbed to a cliff overlooking the ocean and stopped to admire the sheer beauty of the seemingly endless horizon. The path had been carved into the rock, most likely by the land's original inhabitants, and led down an 80-foot sheer wall to a sandy bottom near the mouth of the river. Taking her eyes off the horizon, something caught Lisa's attention. They had not noticed how much erosion had occurred since their last visit here. The path had once been at least 10 feet from the edge of the cliff. Now it was 4 or 5 feet in places. Lisa leaned down to look at the lily flower, no more than 2 feet from the edge, when the ground began to float. Sliding sideways, Lisa caught on a protruding bush root that prevented her from falling completely over the edge. But now her legs dangled, flailing, trying to find something to grab onto. "Ian, help!" Lisa looked at her husband, who froze in place. "Help!" she screamed louder, trying to bring Ian out of his stupor. "Give me your belt!" Lisa knew it wouldn't do her any good if they both fell off the cliff. Ian just stood there. He wasn't frozen in fear, he thought. Maybe this was the answer to his prayers. An easy way to get rid of your wife. None angry boss, or recriminations from their friends and family for leaving his wife and finding someone new. In fact, he would be perceived as unfortunate, someone in need of comfort. They exchanged glances that explained everything. Lisa realized that Ian was going to let her die. Ian realized that Lisa's last thoughts were her realization of his deception. "I'm sorry." Ian said this seriously. After all, he really loved her until recently. That was the last thing Lisa heard before the root broke and she plunged 80 feet into the sea. Her body was then carried further away by a combination of the receding tide and the current of a nearby river. Ian caught a glimpse of Lisa before the low fog offshore made it impossible to see anything. Perhaps she had already sunk. Ian sat on the ground and cried. Of course, an investigation was carried out. There were assumptions. That bastard pushed her off a cliff. People can be so cruel. Luckily for Ian, the investigators were thorough and competent. They found Lisa's footprints where she left the trail, they found fresh erosion, and where the bush had been before it fell. All the evidence supported Ian's testimony. Lisa left the path, came too close to the edge gave way, she grabbed a root, but it was not strong enough to support her weight. She fell down and either died from the fall or drowned. No one will ever know that Ian stood by and let her fall. Lisa's body was never found, which is not surprising given the proximity to the river. The Coast Guard searched for 3 days, but was unsuccessful. A week later, the backpack Lisa was wearing that morning was found on a beach 20 miles north of where she fell, supporting the belief that Lisa did not die in the fall, and the hope that her body was somehow, then, it will be found. But this never happened. The tragic story of the death of a beautiful young wife filled all the news broadcasts within a few hours. Ian wasn't surprised when he returned home on Sunday night to find his burner phone's voicemail filled with messages from Carmen. He left the phone turned off and locked in his briefcase, not taking the risk of taking it with him on a weekend with his wife. Ian listened to the messages, then called Carmen. Carmen answered the phone after the first ring. "Oh my God, Ian. I heard what happened to her." Carmen had never spoken Lisa's name, always calling her she, wife, or bitch, but today she refrained from using a more derogatory term out of respect for the deceased. Carmen also tried her best to keep the joy out of her voice as she feigned sympathy. Ian wasn't the only person who believed prayers were answered when Lisa accidentally fell off a cliff. Carmen tried not to consider the other possibility, that Ian pushed his wife so they could be together, although part of her was floored by the idea that Ian could love her so much. Carmen chatted nonstop for a minute. "When can I see you? Is there anything I can do? Why don't you come over so I can comfort you?" Ian couldn't get a word in and had to interrupt Carmen's monologue. "Carmen, stop for a second. You know they're going to investigate the accident. I will be under scrutiny for some time, at least until the investigation is completed. We need to remain calm and stay in the shadows. Trust me, I want to see you as much as you want to see me. We just need things to stay the same for a few days. Let everything be quiet, just a little longer. The good thing is that we can talk on this phone every night for as long as we want. Can you understand this?" It made sense, but Carmen had been waiting 3 months for Ian to leave Lisa. It was so hard to wait a few more days, especially now that Ian was free. If anything, it was harder because they couldn't meet for lunch or make love at Carmen's apartment like they did whenever Ian pretended he had to work late. Ian was no fool, so every evening he spent in Carmen's bed, he spent the evening at work, just in case the issue of Ian's overtime came up in Lisa's conversation with his boss. Carmen had a short temper and struggled to remain calm, as Ian explained that they would have to be careful for a while. She was already going crazy when Ian told her how Lisa had planned a romantic weekend at a bed and breakfast. She was so angry that she went out last Friday night and was picked up by some big hunk who seemed like he could turn her world upside down. In fact, Carmen was still in bed with her boyfriend on Saturday. During the day, they were watching TV, recovering from their 5th or 6th bout of sex, when the TV program was interrupted by news of a tragic incident involving a local woman. Carmen kicked the guy out, cleared away the takeaway boxes, beer bottles, and sheets before making the first call to Ian's burner phone. Carmen tried her best to forget how the guy made her squeal with pleasure. Ian brought Carmen back to the present. "Carmen, did you hear what I said? I said, I'll do my best to sneak out. I'll try to sneak away in disguise. Reporters hang out in the parking lot. I'll be there on Monday at 9. This was one of the things Carmen loved about Gina. The guy was so damn easy. Carmen raised her hand, looking at her little finger, which Ian was wrapped around, knowing that before the end of the summer there would be a ring on that finger. Ian was tense all day Monday. He had barely slept either of the last 2 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see Lisa looking at him with that look, knowing that Ian would let her die. Ian realized that one of the reasons he had slept so poorly last night was because of Lisa's scent lingering on her side of the bed. Lisa always wore a light scent of Creed perfume, just enough for Ian to smell when he pressed himself against her neck. But now that she no longer shared a bed with him, he needed to get rid of the old smell from the sheets, so he washed the sheets. With nothing better to do, he began putting Lisa's clothes, toiletries, and other bedding and bathroom items into plastic trash bags, thinking there would be no one in the master bedroom or bathroom. Ian left most of the photos in the living room, dining room, and office in case Lisa's mom or friends stopped by. He removed 2 wedding photographs in the hallway, replacing them with nature scenes. The trash bags went to her office. He would get rid of them after he cleaned out all the closets in her office. He closed the door before returning to the living room to pour himself a double shot of Jameson. At 8:30, Ian slipped out the back door of the apartment building and walked the 12 blocks to Carmen's apartment. Carmen opened the door with a smile on her face. There was nothing else on her. "Damn it, Ian, I missed you." Carmen jumped into Ian's arms, wrapping her arms around his neck and her legs around his waist. "Come inside and make love to me. I miss you and I really need you." That's why Ian fell so deeply in love with Carmen, a woman with pure, unadulterated passion who never turned him down, no matter what he asked. Nothing was off the table when it came to sex. "You don't have a wife to go home to. Tonight I'm going to show you how wonderful sex can be." She said this with an evil grin as he threw her onto the bed. "Come here. I promise to save all the bites and scratches below the neckline. Ian spent the night, returning to his apartment before dawn. Ian had put on his tracksuit in case someone, no matter how unlikely it seemed, caught him on the street or entering a building. Although Ian hasn't met any of the neighbors in the 6 months since he and Lisa moved into the complex, the neighbors can be nosy and cause trouble, especially now that he's a celebrity. It turned out that he was right. Mrs. Simpson, the elderly widow opposite, took a special interest in the comings and goings of the young widower. Ian looked in the bathroom mirror. Damn. His chest was almost bleeding from the bites. He grabbed a hand mirror, his back riddled with scratches. Ian smiled, thinking that this was what was missing in his marriage: unbridled passion. Lisa's mother stopped by Tuesday night to sympathize with her son-in-law. It was a tense visit. If Frances Collins noticed the photos were missing from the hallway, she didn't mention it. They spent most of the short visit trying to find something to say to each other, but to no avail. As if things weren't awkward enough, Ian's cell phone rang as they sat in the living room. Ian tried to ignore it. "Are you not going to answer?" Frances asked. Ian looked at the display. It was Carmen, who had probably decided that it was now okay to call his regular phone. "No, just a few reporters or spam." The phone stopped ringing, and immediately the phone Ian had left on the kitchen table began to vibrate. It was obvious that the phone was buzzing in the next room, but they both chose to ignore it, as if ignoring the phone meant it didn't exist. Frances soon left. Despite the fact that Carmen was very worried, Ian decided to spend Tuesday evening at home. There were simply too many calls from reporters, friends, and family. So many people are either expressing their sincere condolences or simply trying to satisfy their voyeuristic urges to be part of a parody. Ian made arrangements with Donna Williams, Lisa's best friend, to hold a social funeral service within a month or two. Without a body, he doesn't have to worry about the grave farce. Ian started acting out his sad faces in front of the bathroom mirror. He collapsed onto the mattress, but something was wrong. Ian sat up and sniffed the air. "Creed," he said out loud. But he did not smell this smell after washing the sheets. Why now? He sniffed Lisa's pillow, thinking it must be from her. He took the pillow to the garbage chute by the elevators and returned to bed. Ian woke up the next morning and decided that he needed to clear the apartment of memories of Lisa. If anyone made a big deal about it, they would pretend they were too upset to constantly remind them of her. He was in his pajamas, boxer shorts, when he entered Lisa's office. He looked around. Something had changed. He somehow felt her presence, as if she had spent yesterday working in this room. Ian's logical brain knew that this feeling was just his conscience combined with a little bit of paranoia. Then he understood why. On the wall opposite Lisa's desk, there were 3 photographs, him and Lisa. Ian looked at the photos. Each photo was taken during their annual anniversary vacation. Ian couldn't remember when she'd put those photos together, but then again, he didn't spend much time in her office. But maybe that's why he felt her presence. He grabbed a plastic bag to put the photos in after taking them out of the frames. Then he began to clear the table. When she put their wedding photo on her desk, it was a smaller copy of one of the photographs he had taken from the hallway. He spent another half-hour filling trash bags before deciding it was too early to deal with all this. He went to the kitchen and opened a beer. Ian was sitting in his underwear, drinking his second bottle of beer and watching some stupid morning talk show, when the bell at the front door brought him out of his daze. "Who is this?" He expected it to be just another reporter. "This is Carol. Can we go up?" Carol was another of Lisa's best friends. She had several. Cursing quietly, Ian pressed the button to unlock the front door before putting on his robe. As he passed by, he made sure that the office door was closed. Less than a minute later, there was a knock on the front door. Carol and her husband stood in the hall with sad expressions on their faces when Ian opened the front door. Carol had a dish in her hand. "Ian, we didn't want to bother you. We just thought we'd stop by and leave something to eat. I remembered how the last time you and Lisa came for dinner, you were delighted with my lasagna." Ian opened the door wider and stepped aside to let them in, thinking that this was his only way out. Carol stepped back but held out the dish. "No, we'll leave you alone. Just take a plate." Carol spoke these words, but it was obvious that she was having a hard time keeping herself under control. Ian took the plate and watched as they turned and walked down the hallway towards the elevators. He couldn't hear what Carol said to her husband after they left. "This poor guy. It's almost noon. The guy is still in his robe and smells of beer. He must be completely devastated." Ian called Carmen at work. "How about I come over for dinner tonight and stay the night? I'll be there at 6. Carmen was delighted and agreed to go to Sammy's for ribs, fries, and coleslaw. The two of them spent the night in her bed. Ian woke up early, ran home, and got ready to go to the office. As he was shaving, something caught his attention. On Lisa's makeup table in the corner of the bathroom was her hairbrush. He could have sworn he threw the comb into one of the bags. Ian picked it up and carried it into the office. Throwing it into one of the trash bags, Ian looked down into the trash can. He could have sworn he emptied yesterday. Inside was a crumpled piece of paper. Ian picked it up and read 2 names in Lisa's handwriting: Peter and Darlene. Ian sat in Lisa's desk chair and thought back to that night almost 4 months ago. It was a week before he met Carmen. Lisa and Ian finished watching some stupid romance. There the couple got married, and the leading actress, Kate Hudson, is pregnant. Lisa was lying on the sofa with her head in Ian's lap. She looked into his eyes. "Have you thought about us having a child?" Ian stroked Lisa's blonde hair. "Yes, I thought about it, but don't you think that we are still young for such obligations?" Lisa sat down, laughing. "Young? Ian, you'll be 30. Even if I got pregnant today, I'd be 27 at birth. We would have been older than either of our parents when their first child was born." Ian had the same attitude when talking about parenting that he did about life, with goofy humor. "Well, I'm really looking forward to whatever it takes to get you pregnant." Lisa slapped him on the chest and laughed. "I'm serious. You want children, right? You always said we could have 2. Ian didn't answer right away. After too long a pause, he hedged his bets. "What about your work?" Lisa wasn't about to let Ian off the hook. "My job will give me 3 months leave with 3/4 pay. Come on, please me and I'll make it worth your time. What will their names be?" Ian had run out of excuses, and besides, the idea of a bribe sounded tempting. He decided to play along. "Peter for a boy, in honor of your father. Darlene, if it's a girl, after my mom." Lisa smiled. She liked the names, but she especially liked that Ian had given up. She pulled down Ian's shorts and gave him his award. Now that Lisa was gone, Ian stared at the names on the piece of paper, and a chill ran down his spine. Ian was late for work on Thursday after 3 days of bereavement leave, walked into the office and had to endure the sympathy of his colleagues. His administrator, Joan, cried as she hugged him. His boss, Joseph, looked like he was holding back his own tears as he spent 15 minutes telling Ian how much Joseph and his wife would miss Lisa. People kept coming to his table to express their condolences, and it became harder and harder to pretend to be sad. Ian was almost on the verge of not answering his calls because reporters often called him. Thank God they didn't have his work number. "Genius systems," says Ian Burns. Ian answered the call, hoping it would be a new client who could take his mind off his personal life. "I know you let her fall and drown." That was all the voice said before cutting off. Joseph chose this moment to look in on him. "Damn it, Ian. You look like you're about to pass out. Come on, let's go to the break room. I'll get you a soft drink or something." Ian allowed Joseph to take him to the break room. With a movement of his head, Joseph silently signaled to the 2 ladies in the room to leave him and Ian alone. The ladies understood and left the room when Joseph mouthed, "Thank you. I know it was hard for you. I can't imagine what you're going through. Do you need more free time?" "No, I was going crazy in the apartment and thought that being busy at work would be the best thing for me. I think it can be done this way. I have an idea. Get out of town for 2 days next week. Your choice. You can fly out on Sunday and spend a couple of days in Phoenix. Come back to the office when you're ready." Ian decided it was a great idea to get out of town and asked Joan to book him a plane ticket, a car, and a hotel. When Ian showed up at Carmen's apartment after work and told her he would be leaving for a few days next week, Carmen was furious. "You're an asshole. What's so important that you need to leave town?" Ian did his best to explain that it was his job, but Carmen wouldn't listen and kicked him out of her apartment. Ian thought about knocking on the door to get her to let him back in until he realized that it would only cause the neighbors to notice the recent widower whose face was all over the weekend news, standing in front of a young, lonely woman's door, begging to be let in. Ian turned around and went home. As soon as Ian walked through the door, he felt Lisa's presence again, and a chill ran down his spine. He turned around and went down to the pub to have dinner and a couple of glasses of ale. Meanwhile, a furious Carmen remembered the sexy guy from last weekend and called him. "Hey, big guy, this is Carmen. Remember me?" "Of course, honey. Are you calling because you want a rematch?" "Yes. Get your cute ass here. Do you remember where?" "I can't tonight. I'm visiting a school friend." "How about tomorrow or Saturday?" Carmen couldn't believe the words that came out of her mouth. "Take it with you. It might be fun." Carmen has done many outrageous things in her time, but everything that happened before tonight will seem trivial in comparison. She almost felt guilty about cheating on Ian, but justified it by saying that Ian was cheating on his wife. Besides, he didn't pay enough attention to her. And she'll make it up to Ian next Tuesday night when he returns, if she can, if it doesn't hurt her too much. Ian finished his third IPA and walked back to his apartment. He called Carmen, but she didn't answer, and he didn't want to leave a voicemail, so he hung up. 10 minutes later, his phone rang. It was Carmen. "Ian, did you call?" "Yeah, baby. Can I come over?" "Not today, Ian. You've made me angry, and maybe it's time for you to think about how hard it is to wait for you. I waited while you were married, and now I'm sitting here all alone because you're leaving on a business trip." "Not until Sunday. I could spend tonight and the next 2 nights with you." "No. We'll talk tomorrow." Carmen ended the call and went back to what she was doing before the phone rang. "Who was that?" the guy asked, playing with her breasts. "My boyfriend. I called him back just to make sure he wasn't coming tonight. So where are we?" Ian looked at his phone and cursed. Opening another beer, he made his decision, but he would wait until morning to call Carmen and tell her. He undressed and headed to bed. As soon as his head hit the pillow, he smelled Creed. Ian jumped out of bed. "Son of a bitch!" and tore the sheets off the bed. He ran to the kitchen for a garbage bag, throwing in sheets, pillows, and a mattress pad, even a blanket. Walking through the hall, he opened the linen closet and put an extra set of sheets in his bag, got dressed, and headed to his car. Ian drove to Walmart, but before entering the store, he drove around the back of the store, where he found trash containers next. To the loading dock, Ian threw the bag into the dumpster and was returning to his car when the guy at the loading dock screamed, "Hey, buddy, you can't throw your trash out there." Ian didn't pay attention to the guy and drove to the entrance of the store, went in and bought new pillows, sheets, and a blanket. The Walmart employee swore at his ass, then looked into the dumpster to see what the guy had thrown out. Every now and then he tells a story about something he found in a bag, and no one who heard the story ever had a reasonable idea why a guy would throw out perfectly nice, clean linens. Early Friday morning, after another sleepless night, Ian dialed Carmen's number, trying to catch her before she left for work. Carmen answered the call in a sleepy voice. After all, she only got 4 hours of sleep after kicking out 2 studs at 2 in the morning. "What do you want, Ian?" Carmen wanted to appear upset by making Ian stand on his tiptoes and kiss her notorious feet. "What I want is for you to move into my apartment tomorrow. I'm taking the day off to get the rest of Lisa's crap out of here. You can move. I need to go to Phoenix for 2 nights, but only for 2 nights. I'll be back on Tuesday evening." Carmen was in high spirits when she heard the words, "when you move." She hoped that it would happen soon, but it turned out even earlier than expected. Her lease was due to expire at the end of next week, and she didn't want to renew it. Driving past Ian's complex, she couldn't believe how nice it was. She imagined herself living there. There was even a swimming pool and a gym. It was all much nicer than her crappy apartment building. In high spirits, but knowing how to unsettle a guy, she answered, "Let me think about it. I'll call you in the evening after work. Please, Carmen. You'll see, we'll make a great couple. Just give us a chance." It took all of Carmen's willpower not to burst out laughing. The guy was hooked like a fish on a fishing rod. "I'll call you in the evening, Ian." She ended the conversation. This was the second time she ended the conversation without telling Ian that she loved him. Ian spent 3 hours Friday morning preparing for his trip to Jefferson Industries. After Joan emailed all the materials Ian needed for the meeting, he spent the rest of the day searching through every drawer, closet, and generally everything he could find of Lisa's things. The clothes will go to the nearest Salvation Army donation box and the rest will go to the recycling bin. Ian spent that evening filling bags. From time to time, he came across some souvenirs from their life together. There must have been a time when we were happy, he thought to himself, although he hated to admit it. On Friday at 7 in the evening, Carmen called from her car to be let into the building. Ian rushed down and helped with her 2 suitcases. "You can help me with the rest of my things later. My lease ends in a week from today, so we have time. The furniture was in the apartment, so we don't have to worry about heavy things." Carmen kissed Ian on the cheek and smiled as she entered the elevator. "I thought you got rid of all her things?" Carmen was in the bedroom, putting her things in the closets and chest of drawers. "What are you talking about? Everything that belonged to Lisa has already disappeared." Ian was already wondering if this was a mistake. Everywhere Carmen went in the apartment, she made some comment about how things should be different. Ian continued to say, "Whatever you want," and continued to watch the baseball match. He had told her which dresser to use in the master bedroom, and now she was nagging him from there. Carmen entered the living room and stood in front of the TV. "That's what I'm talking about. It was in one of the dresser drawers." Carmen held up the sexiest pair of thongs imaginable. "You always told me that your wife is a prude. No prude has ever worn such a thing." Carmen threw them in Ian's face. He took a breath and couldn't believe it. The smell of Creed. Just a hint. When will this finally stop? He thought. She never wore them. Even Ian knew it wasn't convincing, but he knew for sure it was true. He couldn't remember Lisa wearing them, as she claimed thongs were uncomfortable. Carmen looked at him as if he had grown a third eye. Bullshit. Carmen recognized the smell. It was Creed, the same perfume that Ian bought Carmen as a gift a couple of months ago. Now she knew why. It was the same scent that his wife used. Ian didn't want to get caught, so he gave his girlfriend the same scent as his wife. Very clever. This only made Carmen even more angry. "You're an idiot." Carmen returned to the bedroom to finish unpacking. Poor Ian spent his first night together with Carmen trying to make love and was rejected. They spent Saturday removing the rest of Carmen's belongings from her apartment, doing their best not to attract the neighbors' attention. Ian had a 2-hour flight on Sunday, and Carmen finally let him make love to her that morning. By the time Ian left the apartment, he was sure he had made a mistake. But how to get rid of it? Little did Ian know that his fun had just begun. He threw his suitcase into the back seat of the car and started to drive out. Something was wrong. When he got out and approached the passenger seat, he discovered a flat front tire. After calling customer service, Ian cursed himself when the dispatcher gave an estimate of 2 hours before the truck could get there. Ian decided to try changing the tire, thinking, how hard can it be if some greaser can do it? Ian assembled the jack according to the owner's manual before lifting the cover to access the spare tire. On the spare tire was an envelope with his name on it. Although he was in a hurry, curiosity got the better of him, and he opened the envelope to read the letter. It was from Lisa and read, "Ian, my love, if you are reading this letter, it means you have a flat tire, and you are probably upset right now. I hope you feel better knowing that you have a woman at home who loves you, and when you get home, I'll be happy to pour you a drink, give you a massage, and maybe something else. With all my love, your wife, Lisa. Instead of lifting his spirits, the letter made him even angrier. What's the worst? The letter smelled like Creed. Ian went back to the owner's manual, read the instructions, and finished the job of changing the tire. Now he will have to hurry to catch his flight. Joey Bronkowski had half an hour left in his second day as a TSA agent when he noticed the guy in the security line looking nervous. Remembering his training, he watched as the guy continued to fidget. Taking a closer look, some things didn't add up. The guy was dressed like a businessman, but his hands were not the hands of a businessman, rather dirty and stained with grease. Plus, Joey thought the guy looked familiar. Could he have seen his face on one of the watch list posters in the locker room? Something rang in Joey's head. Ian placed his carry-on bag on the conveyor belt before preparing to go through the body scanner. He only had 15 minutes left before the gate, for his flight closed. "Hurry, hurry," he said to the woman in front of him, who seemed to suddenly remember that her keys were in her pocket. Ian tried to get around her, but she looked at him and said, "Sorry," and did not allow him to get ahead. It finally went through. Ian managed on his own and stood waiting for his bag to go through the X-ray machine. "Sir, is this your bag?" Ian looked up and saw the TSA agent with his bag. "Yes, what's the matter?" Joey was pleased with himself. He knew there was something wrong with this guy. "Sir, please come here. We'll take a look inside." "Listen," Ian began in an angry tone. "I only have 10 minutes to catch my flight. Can't you pester anyone else?" The warden overheard the conversation and came closer. "Bronkowski, what do you have?" Joey pointed to the image on the screen. The warden made a grimace that could only be interpreted as concern, then turned to Ian. "Sir, come here." Ian was about to start yelling at this new guy, but at the last second he changed his mind. Maybe he could get this over with faster if he kept his mouth shut. Unlucky, unlucky. As Joey inspected the duffel bag, he opened a side pocket on the outside of the case, a pocket that Ian had never used. Ian watched in horror as the agent pulled out a large, sharp object that looked like a knife. "Son of a bitch," Ian thought to himself. Lisa's letter opener from her office. How the hell did it end up in my bag? What Ian said out loud was, "I didn't put it in my bag." "Sir, did someone else pack your bag, or was it out of your control for some time?" Ian couldn't admit either of them. "Then please come with us." An hour later, Ian left the observation room and was allowed through security, but only after a very awkward strip search and a stern lecture from the police about what would happen if he ended up on the no-fly list, if he ever tried to go through security again with a prohibited object. Joey Bronkowski received a big thank you in a letter in his personnel file for his vigilance. Sure enough, Ian's flight had left over an hour ago, and he went to the service counter to rebook his flight to Phoenix. Unfortunately, the next available flight was only at 8 in the evening. Ian sat in the airport bar for 4 hours and drank 3 double Jamesons. Having arrived, he checked into his hotel just after 1 in the morning. He felt like crap. He stumbled into his room, turned off his phone, and turned off the hotel phone, just in case. Bang, bang, bang! Someone was banging on Ian's door. He got out of bed, the clock showing 4:30, and walked to the door, looking through the peephole to see the lady who checked him in. He opened the door slightly. "What's the matter?" "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Burns. Your wife tried to call you. She says it's an emergency, that the apartment is flooded. She said to call her." "What the hell?" he burst out automatically. Ian thanked the lady, turned the phone back on, and called Carmen, thinking, why would Carmen call me and pretend to be my wife? It was the only explanation he could think of for such a crazy message. Maybe the roof of the building was leaking. Carmen's phone rang 6 times before she picked it up. She didn't seem happy to be woken up. "What?" That's all she said. "Carmen, were you trying to call me?" "Ian, it's 4 in the morning. Why would I call you?" He was ready to tell her that he had received a message that his wife had called when he realized that it sounded crazy. "Sorry, baby. It must have been a bad dream. Good night." Ian ended the call before he heard Carmen say, "asshole." Ian never fell asleep again. The receptionist's words kept him awake. She said it was an emergency, there was water everywhere. At 5 o'clock, he finally got out of bed to make a cup of coffee. He spent the next 2 hours watching the sports talking heads on ESPN talk nonsense before showering and getting ready for his meeting. The CEO and operations manager of Jefferson Industries were waiting for him when he pulled up in his rental car. Ian looked as bad as he felt. His head was pounding, his ears were ringing, and he struggled to stay awake. The client knew that Ian had recently lost his wife and was willing to cut him some slack for wasting most of the meeting on Monday morning. The general manager eventually sent Ian back to the hotel, promising to reschedule the meeting soon, then called Joseph and said he can't send Ian again until he pulls himself together. Ian drove back to the hotel with every intention of collapsing into bed and getting some sleep, then catching his booked flight home on Tuesday afternoon. Instead, his phone rang as he settled into his room. He was the lead Ocean County detective investigating Lisa's death. He told Ian that neither the county coroner nor the district attorney were prepared to rule Lisa's death an accident. The detective asked Ian to return to the police station to answer some more questions. "To be honest," the detective said, "we were ready to sign the agreement until we received an anonymous call claiming that there was a witness who swears that he saw you push Mrs. Burns off the cliff. We would have thought it was a prank, but this man seemed to know so many facts. I'm sure we can clear this up if you come back and review the events with us." To say Ian was worried would be an understatement. He knew he didn't push Lisa off the cliff, but how many times had innocent men been convicted? If anything, litigation would be costly and would delay the life insurance payout. Ian went down to the bar and drank too many pints and too many shots of tequila. The bartender finally interrupted him when he became loud and belligerent. Heading back to his room, he spent an hour vomiting alcohol. That's all instead of a good night's sleep. Carmen had a better Monday than Ian, but not by much. Last night, something kept waking her up every hour. As soon as she fell asleep, a quiet buzzing sound would start, but only for a few seconds, long enough to wake her up, but not long enough to track where the sound was coming from. Finally, waking up every hour from 10 to 2, she plugged her ears with cotton and was already asleep when Ian called at 4 and asked his crazy question, "Have you tried to call me?" Carmen arrived at work on time, but due to lack of sleep, she made several mistakes, which her boss quickly discovered. After the second mistake, Carmen received a beating and a warning. Monday evening was no better. In fact, he was much worse. When she spoke to Ian, he was drunk and incoherent. She tried to fall asleep at 9, but by 11, that damn buzzing started again. Carmen put cotton in her ears again and went back to sleep. She had no idea how long she had slept or what time it was when she felt someone's presence in the room. The room was dark, but there was enough light to see a woman standing at the foot of the bed. It was supposed to be a ghost, dressed in a white robe, white face, long hair hanging down to his shoulders. Taking a closer look, Carmen saw that the woman's hair was wet, and then she realized that it was Lisa Burns. "What do you want?" Carmen's voice was barely audibly, her throat constricted with fear. Was it an answering smile or an evil grin? The woman did not answer, and Carmen ducked under the blanket. "He killed me, and he will kill you too." The woman's hand reached out to Carmen. Carmen pulled the blanket over her head, shivering and praying for the first time since she was a little girl. Time passed. 10 minutes or 2 hours, Carmen could not tell, but when she finally found the courage to throw back the covers and look, the vision disappeared. Or was it for real? Carmen got out of bed, slowly moving from room to room, turning on every light in the apartment, slowly looking in every closet, under the bed, and behind the sofa. She headed to the kitchen, taking a bottle of wine from the refrigerator. Looking into the closet, Carmen reached past the wine glasses and grabbed one of Ian's pint glasses. Ian's phone rang. It was 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning. Hello? At this point, he was almost afraid to answer the phone. Nothing good had come of the last few calls. Ian? It was Joseph. What the hell is going on? I just got off the phone with Mr. Fairbanks from Jefferson. He said you wasted his day yesterday. I'm sorry. That was all he could think of to say. That's not all. Yesterday a detective called me. I wanted to know if I think you're capable of killing Lisa. I told him no way, but why are they asking questions? Is there something you should tell me? No, I swear I didn't kill her, Joseph. It was an accident. Okay. You better talk to that detective and sort this out. Tomorrow I will go there. Then on Thursday, see what can be done to calm the people in Jefferson. Or should I send Halstead? Halstead was always trying to steal Ian's accounts. Joseph was now hinting that Halstead should take over Jefferson's account. This amounted to almost 7% of Yen's compensation. Ian was infuriated just by hearing that sentence. Do not do that. Give me until the end of the week. I'll sort everything out with this detective and Mr. Fairbanks. I like you, Ian, but I can't afford to lose track of Jefferson. Fix it. Joseph ended the call. Ian had 2 hours to catch his flight, but he got there with 5 minutes to spare. During the flight, he bought several of these small bourbons from the flight attendant. She almost refused to serve him because he looked rather bad. Twice now, Carmen heard a telephone ringing somewhere in the apartment. When it rang a second time, she found a burner phone in the jacket pocket of one of Ian's coats. Carmen answered the call. Is Ian there? It was a woman calling. Who is this? Carmen couldn't believe it. This bastard had another girlfriend. Tell Ian that Janet called. And she hung up. Carmen looked at the call history. Ian must have cleared it. But she found 2 messages from the same number she had just called from. They arrived on Saturday. Thank you, and find my panties. Both with a dozen love and kiss emojis. It rained all Tuesday morning. Despondency did not improve Carmen's gloomy mood after a sleepless night and the fact that she found her phone in the morning. It was not yet noon when she opened another bottle of wine and poured herself a glass. The TV was on. Carmen didn't pay much attention to what was on. It was one of those stupid daytime soap operas that her mother used to watch for half the day until the dishes were collected and the laundry was finished. When Carmen's father returned home from work, a quarrel began. The parents shouted and cursed. The memory of her dysfunctional family only upset Carmen even more. Why do people stay together if they only make each other more miserable? She thought to herself, pouring a second glass of wine. The question never answered itself because 2 television actors interrupted her thoughts. A female actress slapped a male actor and accused him of cheating. The actor laughed at the woman and admitted his affair with a younger and prettier colleague. Carmen watched this scene in horror. Are all men really such bastards? She asked the television screen. By the time Ian walked through the door 3 hours later, Carmen was finishing the last bottle. Ian dropped his suitcase on the floor in the hallway and was hit by a sudden stream of poison that burst out of Carmen's mouth. Hi, baby. These words left his lips just before the storm broke. Your girlfriend called you an asshole. What are you talking about? What a girl. Carmen grabbed the phone and threw it at Ian's head. Don't play Mr. Innocence with me. I found the phone you used. The phone flew past Ian's head and crashed against the wall. For God's sake, I don't understand what you're talking about. You are drunk. Carmen was becoming hotter and more frantic with every second. How dare Ian try to talk her way out of this? She knew the rules of the game. Deny, deny, deny. He's been using a burner phone to communicate with her for the last 3 months, and now he's trying to deny that he has another phoning for another bitch. She ran to where the phony had fallen to the floor, picked it up, and poked him in the chest. Here, just read the messages she sent. Between 3 drinks on the plane and a lack of sleep, on top of a disastrous trip, and a lousy flight in a thunderstorm that left the plane shaking like a leaf in the sky, Ian was having a hard time processing what Carmen was screaming about. He needed a drink, but instead he was dealing with an irrational, crazy woman. Ian looked at the phone in his hand. He pressed the power button, but nothing happened. The phone was broken. Ian handed the phone to Carmen. You broke it. He went to the minibar to pour himself a strong drink, a 12-year-old Highland Park, and more. Carmen couldn't believe it. The evidence is gone. Now Carmen started screaming louder. You son of a bitch! It was there. Her messages to you. The calls she made were in the history log. They were there. Ian finished the first glass and poured a second. You're crazy. There is no other woman. His voice pierced Carmen to the core. Go take a shower and sober up. We'll talk when you're not drunk. Ian opened the sliding doors to the balcony and stepped out to get some fresh air and get away from this crazy woman. He lived with Lisa for 3 years and had never experienced anything like this. He didn't know how to cope with it. It's best to just leave. He began to close the sliding door when it slipped from his hands. Don't tell me to sober up. Don't tell me you're not going to leave me for another woman. I saw the messages. You'll pay, bastard. I hate you. I will kill you. Carmen pushed Ian in the chest. Under normal circumstances, Ian would have pressed his back against the railings surrounding the balcony. The railings were built to the latest standards and high enough that no one could fall. Under normal circumstances, but by a quirk of the universe, Lisa's herb pot was located directly between Ian and the railing. As Ian stumbled backwards, his foot caught the edge of a pot, and he went over the railing and dropped 5 floors to the sidewalk below. Carmen screamed in horror as she ran to the railing and saw Ian's lifeless body below. She couldn't believe it, and it would be years before she would forget the look in Ian's eyes as he fell backwards, clutching at the air in a futile attempt to find support. Carmen began screaming, "Help, help!" and ran to the front door, still screaming, "Call 911," before 3 or 4 neighbors opened their doors and came to her aid. 2 neighbors called the police on their phones as soon as they realized what Carmen was trying to say. Mrs. Simpson, a neighbor across the street, sat Carmen down on the sofa and tried to calm her down with a glass of water. During the subsequent investigation, it was generally accepted that it was a tragic accident, largely caused by poor placement of the herb pot. Carmen would have received a suspended sentence for her participation, if not for one circumstance. The neighbor happened to be sitting on her balcony next to Ian's when she heard screams and looked over to see Carmen forcefully pushing Ian, screaming, "I'll kill you." Carmen eventually pleaded guilty to negligent homicide and was sentenced to 18 months in state prison. 3 months later. So, everything I tell you is confidential unless it's illegal? Gloria Turner, a psychologist, nodded in agreement. Even if it is immoral or unethical, as long as it does not violate the law. Another nod in response to this question. The psychologist remained motionless with a notepad in her lap and a pen in her right hand, waiting for her patient to begin. I've always been a Pollyanna. I don't know why, considering what a bitch my mother has always been. But that's how I looked at life. Like good things come to good people. But as I fell off that cliff into the ocean and my husband stood there letting it happen, something just snapped. Lisa Burns took a sip of water. I hit the water and felt the tide carry me out to sea. The water was cold. I knew it wouldn't take long to become hypothermic, but I fought the urge to fight the current, took off my shoes and backpack, and floated on my back until the current stopped carrying me. There was low fog near the shore. I couldn't see the shore or anything around me, but I was swimming towards where I thought the shore should be. That's when I heard old rock music on the radio. I swam towards the sound and couldn't believe it. There was a guy pulling a jar of crabs out of the ocean. I don't know who was more surprised, me or him. Lisa started crying. He lifted me out of the water, helped me undress, wrapped me in a woolen blanket, and took the boat back to the shore. He and his wife fed me and took care of me. When the news showed, we watched as Ian cried crocodile tears. I decided to make his life a living hell until he confessed to what he did. I decided to pursue Ian. Mr. and Mrs. Crane took me back to town and got me a room at a nearby motel using their credit card. When I think about this couple, I have to say that it helped restore some of my faith in people. Have you done anything to thank them? Gloria interrupted Lisa's story. Yes, Mr. Crane has a new outboard motor for his fishing boat, and Mrs. Crane has a new convection oven. On the way back to town, they chatted, and I overheard their conversation. I was in the back seat, and I know they weren't hinting. They thought I was sleeping. I checked into my motel room and snuck into the apartment on Monday evening. Funny, I was the one who objected to having a hidden key taped under the front doormat. Ian insisted on it. Anyway, Ian is usually a deep sleeper, and I thought I could move around the apartment without waking him. It turns out that I had nothing to worry about. He spent the night with his girlfriend, whose existence I had not even suspected until that day. I placed a few mementos here and there to remind Ian how much we once loved each other, including hanging our anniversary photos in my office after I noticed he had put our wedding photos away in the hallway. Then she spritzed some of her perfume on the sheets. I did something else that night that I never would have done before. I logged into Ian's work and personal email accounts from his laptop, which he left in the bedroom. I knew his passwords, he probably didn't know it, but I never spied until Monday evening. That's when I found out there was Carmen. She emailed him after hearing the news of my disappearance. She couldn't reach him on the burner phone they used to communicate, another thing I learned, and was worried about him. At least that's what she wrote. Lisa began to cry, remembering this. Gloria handed her a box of tissues. "How much time do we have?" Lisa asked Gloria. 2 hours. Don't worry. You're my last meeting for today. Gloria knew that this session would be intense for Lisa and did not want to interrupt it. Besides, Gloria couldn't wait to hear how Lisa carried out her revenge. Once Lisa calmed down, she continued. "I returned on Tuesday evening. I had to be quiet because Ian was there, sleeping. I almost laughed out loud when I discovered the pile of bedding in the hallway where he had thrown it. The spirits were working. I moved a couple of things and left. Wednesday evening was better because Ian spent the night with his girlfriend and I could move around freely. I rummaged through the trash bags Ian had filled and found a few things I didn't want to throw away. It's amazing how what you thought was important no longer has value when your life is turned upside down. I took a chance and grabbed my laptop, hoping Ian wouldn't notice it was missing. This is where I got really angry. I left my hairbrush in the bathroom where he could find it and wrote the names of our future children on a piece of paper for him to find. Lisa told Gloria about the night she and Ian came up with names. Now Gloria took a moment to wipe her eyes with a napkin. Gloria interrupted again. "Wait, what about your mother? Did it bother you that your mother thought you were dead the whole time you were away?" Lisa smirked slightly in response to this question. For me, this was another revelation. I watched my mother being interviewed on Fox and CNN on her first day with Crane. I was ready to call her and tell her the good news. But I watched my mother enjoy the attention she received. It was all because of her, not because of me. My father was my real parent until he died. My mother rarely paid attention to me. Oh, once or twice I think she tried, but she never warmed to me. She loved Ian more than me. I tried to be a good daughter, the whole Judeo-Christian honor your mother thing and all that. But it was mostly a facade on our part. Lisa paused. "Can I have some more coffee?" Both women stood up to pour a second cup. I'm not going to bore you with every detail of what I did over the next few days. I actually called him at work on Thursday, changed my voice and told him I saw him let his wife die. I told the police the same thing a few days later. After reading his email, I had a copy of his route, so on Sunday morning I flattened one of his tires and left a love note in the spare tire compartment. After I found out his girlfriend was moving in with us, I got creative. I bought the phone at Walmart and put it in one of his coats in the closet. I called this number when I found out she would be there alone and asked to speak to Ian. Told her I was his other girlfriend and she should ask him to call me. I texted saying I enjoyed our time Tuesday night and asked if he found the underwear I left there. How she screamed. Lisa smiled, remembering how much fun she had when she pissed Carmen off. The best part was sneaking into the apartment in the middle of the night and ghosting her. This was after I called Ian's hotel and asked the receptionist to wake Ian up with the news that his wife was trying to contact him. Gloria couldn't help herself. None of this is illegal. In fact, I think it's pretty damn inspiring. From what I read in the newspapers, I understand that you are not accused of any crime. But I guess I feel a little sorry for Carmen. She was charged with negligent homicide and could end up serving a few years in prison. Seems harsh. Lisa shook her head. Maybe she'll stay away from other people's husbands when she's released. I wasn't going to do anything other than break them up and make Ian admit what he had done. I never thought it would end with Ian's death. Gloria, being a married woman herself, thought that this might serve as a lesson to other potential husband snatchers. Perhaps Lisa was right. She nodded silently and let Lisa finish. I think if the police want to get upset, they can make a mountain out of a molehill because I faked amnesia for 10 days. But they would have to prove that I didn't have amnesia, and they didn't seem too interested in finding out where or why I was hiding. Gloria stopped taking notes and looked up. Well, Lisa, you gave me a great backstory in this first session. What do you want to get out of our future sessions? 3 things. I want to trust people again, see the best in them. I've become jaded, and I don't like it. Secondly, I want to understand why Ian couldn't love me as much as I loved him, where everything went wrong. And third, I want to be able to spend the $500,000 I got from Ian's life insurance without feeling any guilt. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.